Hey free to play gang, welcome back to another video. So today we're going to take a look at the final ritual boss content tier list, and it's going to be Fafnir. Okay, so I'm probably not going to update this list for probably like, I don't know, maybe the next 2 months. Now do take note that everything I say comes from my own perspective, so I have my own opinions, so do you. You may not agree with everything I say, but at least please listen to my explanation as well. Okay, so without further ado, let's start with Liuli. Okay, so if you want to peruse debuffs, she is useful for stripping Fafnir, getting a 2.3 average hit on Fafnir every third skill that she uses. Now she also brings a seer debuff, which can be quite important if you want to run Fafnir a little bit faster, so because of that I think she deserves an A tier. Next one for Bardon, he might actually not be entirely useless because of his counter attacks, but I'll highly suggest against it, do not even try him. Okay, next one we have Berenice. She is talked about a lot for Fafnir. She's a definite S tier, so she's easily the best support and healer for Fafnir with incredible HP scaling shields and multi-hits. Now next one we have Chang Pu. Okay, so Chang Pu, I always prefer prevention rather than cure, so her immunity is actually really useful here as opposed to cleansers like Heng Yue for example. So because of that, I think I'm gonna put her at A tier. Now next, I'm actually not lying when I say this, but David is actually pretty decent for Fafnir. So take a look at his third skill, right? He actually has a multi-hit for 4 hits and he strips buffs at the same time. Now in addition to all of that, he also has a really low cooldown of just 3 turns, so I think he is not so bad. And furthermore, his passive also allows him to remove the debuffs that he has on himself, primarily the stunts, right? So because of that, I'm gonna put him at A tier. Next we have Drew. So he is elementally disadvantaged with single hitting skills, so D tier. Same goes for Freddy as well, they are both kind of like the same thing. Now next we have Hall. So his passive might seem good, but honestly just bring another multi-hitter instead. I think that's a little bit more efficient. He also doesn't take the last hit with his passive, so that's kind of sad. So you can't actually use him to run as like a support tank against the Fafnir's freezing attack. Now next one we have Helena, straight up D tier. You already have a Chang Pu, what's the point of her? And now Jeanne. Okay, so she is the perfect Esper for buff stripping and multi-hitting. She has multi-hits on her first skill and her third skill, and her third skill also has a really good chance to strip buffs, so she's going to be quite useful over here. Now next we have Lauren. Okay, so she is pretty good for reviving dead allies, but that also usually means that you're probably going to lose because, you know, Fafnir already has a lot of extra attack power by now. So because of that, I think I'm going to put her at C tier. She still has a little bit of use. Next we have Layla. So she is going into dog tier, as in along with Drew and Freddy. Now Leon is just a single hitter and Liao has no use as well. Now next we have Melanie, who is probably the most free to play option for speed leader buff, right? But she doesn't have anything else on her kit because you cannot AP control Fafnir, and she does not have multi-hits as well. So because of that, D tier. Now Q is actually pretty good for fast clearing this annoyingly long fight. It doesn't work anymore, but you could take a look at a video I made about a sub-minute run with Q. So because of that, I think he still has some use. Now next we have Tang. He is probably the strongest DPS Esper against Fafnir now with an insane amount of multi-hits. So because of that, clearly an S tier. Anki Chai is a definite no. Now Suhua, some of you guys may disagree with me, but honestly I'm just going to chuck her at D tier. She's, in my opinion, quite useless over here. You just don't have that kind of room to have an attack buffer like her in the spot when you can have someone else like Berenice who has both multi-hits and buffs at the same time. Now next we have Zelma. Okay, so she is only going to S tier if you are going to the buff stripping path. So there's 2 ways that you can defeat Fafnir, right? Number 1, you can use raw damage. Number 2, you can strip his immunity buff to land more debuffs like defense breaks, slows, seer debuff and all that, so you can increase the amount of damage output that way. So that is where Zelma excels in. Now next you have Alexa, a mediocre support with no multi-hits. And as for Anasidora, so she does have a good speed buff on her third skill, however that is not enough reason to use her, so this is the wrong content for her. Arcana, please no. Esenath, invalid content, completely invalid content. Her main selling point is her AP pushing and her Lotus Mark. Her Lotus Mark is okay here, but her AP push is a strict no-no. Now Bonnie, not the right content, going to D tier. Okay, so Catherine, she's definitely going to S tier. So she's an extremely strong support with Astral Witchcraft as long as you have 0 resistance on her. So she has more opportunity to be stunned and therefore increases her own speed that way. And that way she can cleanse debuffs rather fast. And she also has a multi-hit on her first skill. Now Celine, okay, so just like Anasidora, this is not the right content. However, her cleanse on her second skill might come in clutch. So I think I'm going to put her at C tier. The rest of her kit is generally quite useless as well. Now next we have Chloe. She is not entirely useless, but I'm going to have to put her at D tier for a couple of reasons. Okay, number 1, her element is off, and number 2, you need to pray that your second and third skills hit the mark. If not, she's just wasted space. Next we have Dahlia. AP pushes are not good over here. Joza is a straight no. Ira is a straight no as well. Now Fabrice, okay, so his second skill doesn't actually work because you cannot increase your AP in Fafnir. However, his immunity might be quite decent over here because it has a really good uptime of just 3 turns cooldown. So he is still quite strong, but the thing is you already have a Chang Pu, so I'm not sure why you really need a Fabrice over here. Now next, Falcon. Okay, so this is a little bit too complicated to talk about right now. I'm gonna have to put in a D tier, but nope, the synergy of his kit with buff stripping does not work here and is not a thing. Okay, now moving on to Heng Yue. Some of you guys may put her higher, and this is where most people will disagree with me. I'm gonna put her at B tier. She's not entirely that good for Fafnir. Now she does not multi-hit and she cleanses, which is ineffective when you should be focused more on immunity instead. However, she isn't totally useless because her first skill can remove buffs as well. But I don't think that most of you guys will be running accuracy on her, so that is where she falls apart. Now Jacob, completely useless here. Jiang Man, completely inefficient over here. Kara, I don't even need to say, right? Kaylee, controls do not work on Fafnir. Now Laura, okay, so this is an interesting one. So she's very strong for Fafnir, okay, so you literally don't need healers and you can go on a boss rampage straight away. So basically just 1 Laura and 4 DPS Espers. So whenever your allies take a turn, they get protected with a thick shield that prevents all of Fafnir's AoE damage. So because of that, she has a lot of use. I'm going to put her at A tier. There is going to be one Esper that excels a little bit more than her, and I'll explain in just a moment. Next we have Lin Xiao. Even though she does single hits, she is not completely useless, so to speak, because of her third skill. So she has an AoE defense break and a slow debuff. So as long as you can land it on all of the enemies, right, including the followers, you're good to go. So the thing is, if you can slow the follower on the right, that's pretty awesome, because then you'll be able to prevent a lot of the immunity buff that the follower does on the boss. So she's actually not that bad. I'm going to have to put her at C tier. Now next we have Long Mian. So he has a good speed leader buff, but generally ineffective. So he's pretty okay for landing AoE slow debuffs, but that's basically it, so C tier. Now Louis is, in my opinion, one of the most flexible choices over here, so he's definitely S tier, okay? He works for both the raw DPS path and the debuffing path as well, because he can land a lot of debuffs, which makes him really good with Zelma, and he also has Seer debuff as well. Luo Yan is a straight up no. Now Lin is pretty good. I'll have to put her at S tier because of how powerful she is in terms of like a self-sustaining DPS for Fafnir, so she can carry her own weight in that sense. Meredith is useless. Now Mona, okay, she has a multi-hitting third skill, but the thing is you already have a Zelma or like a Tang Yun and all that, right? So why would you even consider using Mona? Next we have Nicole. So her Soul Guard doesn't actually work to prevent the death of your ally when the boss uses his single target nuke. So because of that, D tier. Pritzker is no. Renzi is no. Now Sander, I would like to put him either in S tier or A tier. I feel like he deserves S tier for a couple of reasons, okay? So the only reason why I think he's in A tier is because of his typing, but I don't really feel like his typing is that much of a problem. So he has a perfect kit, especially with his leader buff that grants you 25% extra speed, which is always very helpful. But the thing is, he moves very fast and he does pretty good damage as well. And he has the ability to slow the boss as long as you have buff stripping. So I think he's actually pretty good. Stewart, no. Taylor, no. Okay, and next we have the twins. Okay, so the twins have incredible skill uptime. Their cooldowns are generally very short and they do a ton of multi-hits as well. So they're very good for wave clearing, for shield breaking, and boss killing. Now Ahmed is undeniably the strongest healer for Fafnir. Okay, so for several reasons. He removes the HP cap reduction on your teammates, and he also increases the damage that your allies do over time as the fight drags on, and he also multi-hits on his first skill. So he's like the perfect healer for Fafnir. Okay, this is gonna surprise some of you guys. Barondina is actually A tier. So every single turn that she takes, she strips the buff from the boss, right? So she removes all the immunity buffs. That allows you to have incredible uptime in your debuff landing. And on top of that, she's also gonna do pretty decent damage. Although she's not gonna multi-hit, but she's at least gonna do pretty good damage. Now Cecilia is not entirely useless. She has immunity and all that, and she also revives your allies. But the thing is, when you're at a stage where you need to revive all of your allies, you are basically gone, because at that point of time, the boss probably has a lot of damage stacks on himself. So she's not entirely useless. Now Clara is not as strong as Ahmed, but she's still very good nonetheless. So she has immunity, she has a very big heal, and she also has team-wide shield buff. So that makes her rather complete in my opinion. Donna is definitely no. Now Gabrielle, okay, so this is another Esper that some of you guys might disagree. I'm gonna put her at A tier. Some of you guys would probably put her at S tier. Now the reason why I put her at A tier is because she only has one single multi-hit, which is her second skill, and her third skill has an incredibly long cooldown of 4 turns. So the only reason why I think she deserves an A tier is because she's generally naturally going to be built very fast, and because of that, she's still going to have some good uptime in terms of taking more turns. But with that said, I don't think that her kit is perfect over here. Next we have Height. So he is really good for sustained DPS and stripping buffs. So because of that, easy S tier. Jin Yu Yao, don't even think about it. Okay, so now Lewis has a decent 4-hit combo on his second to third skill, but I wouldn't recommend him due to his typing. And then we have Liling. Okay, so he's a very very strong Esper with a lot of multi-hits. However, his typing is what sets him back. So because of that, I'm gonna have to put him at B tier. And Lucas as well, right? Another multi-hitter cucked by his typing. So I'm gonna have to put him at B tier as well. But it's really quite unfortunate because he does have buff stripping on his third skill as well. Next, Nama, no. Now as for Ollie, his passive should not work over here. He's not able to protect his allies, but he does have a nice speed leader buff. But the thing is, I feel like his kit is not good enough over here. Next we have Raven. So this is probably the only PvE content that she thrives in. Okay, so she has a wonderful strip onto a defense break on her third skill, and she carries a bunch of multi-hits as well, so I think she deserves an A tier. Okay, so you remember what I talked about Laura earlier? Now we're going to talk about Sally. Okay, so Sally with Astro Witchcraft is insanely strong for Fafnir. Now the thing is, if your allies are stunned, they're actually going to gain 50 speed because of Astro Witchcraft. And the thing is, because of Sally, as your allies take their turn, they are going to cleanse away that stun debuff on themselves, and therefore they actually take a turn that way. So what this means is that with Sally, if your team is running like very low resistance, they are able to move much faster as well. So that's quite an interesting mechanic in my opinion. So because of that, strictly S tier. She's really good for Fafnir. Next we have Sienna. She's honestly a really strong buffer, but has almost nothing else to offer for Fafnir. Tang Xuan is straight up no. I do not recommend him at all. Teva also absolutely no. Now Tia, okay, so while she has a very good speed leader buff of 25% speed, she's otherwise quite useless here. So because of that, I have to chuck her at D tier. We got to be fair to Ollie. Now Tricky, okay, so he's the king of multi-hits who farms Zeus relics for himself over here. So he also carries a strip on his third skill and can return debuffs on himself onto the boss, which makes him rather useful and effective. So because of that, S tier. And finally, we have Unas. So his passive has incredible uptime for his immunity on your entire team. So whenever he takes a turn, your entire team becomes immune to the debuffs that Fafnir can land. And he also multi-hits on his first skill. So he is pretty much a cheat code for Fafnir, but I think he only deserves an A tier because he doesn't have all that much else to offer for Fafnir. So that's the end of this tier list video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any comments, feel free to leave it down in the comment section below. Now obviously, as you can see here, the tier is really quite spaced out, right? So a lot of the Espers are either in D tier or in S tier. So they're either really good or really bad. Now that's the problem with Fafnir because he is more of a technical boss. So the way that you deal with him is to rely on specific mechanics of the game. And because of that, that renders a lot of Espers quite useless. So it's really unfortunate that this is the case. So like for example, Leon, this is quite sad that he's not useful here because I feel like his typing and his kit makes him so strong, but because he doesn't multi-hit, that's where he falls apart. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to leave a thumbs up. It really helps the channel, and subscribe for more Dislyte content. Now this has been Daddy Free to Play, and as always, I will see you in the next video.